what's going on.
Yeah.
Conversation.
And then we're going to talk a little bit about, how do we have it labeled on the agenda here? Sort of the concept of,
I think it says program performance measures.
okay,
Results-based accountability.
program performance measures. It's not on the agenda, on the printed agenda, because we switched things around. Yes. In any case, welcome Representative Tolino.
Thank you.
And should we pepper you with questions about the budget, or do you want to give us a?
Why don't you pepper me with questions about the budget? I'm not going to walk through
Yeah.
all of the changes, but what's on your mind, and I'll certainly offer that. Yeah, first, what's on your mind, and then I can
Just to start with this sort of this, where it is right now and what's going to be happening next.
Sure.
Very high
I'll
level.
start with there, and then you can have any direct specifics. So the Senate is on the floor right now, in third reading of the bill. As soon as they pass it, we'll probably receive it in the morning. We'll huddle, declare the need for a conference committee, and then the speaker will announce the conference committee from the podium, and the conference committee can then start to get organized. This, for the new members, this really is the kind of beginning of the final countdown to adjournment. Typically, once the House and Senate are in budget conference, it's really somewhere between 10 and 14 days that will be done. And some years it's really very simple, and frankly, the conference stays open long enough to give the policy committees time to catch up. Other times there are major policy or political dynamics where the House and Senate aren't aligned. Say, for instance, around childcare, paid family leave, that would be an example. So we don't know what will happen. And then there's lots of details that we will be working out together. So yeah, just I was going to start with that.
Yeah, I have a question. What is it the budget that's being debated in the Senate? Or a specific bill?
Well, they had both. I mean, like we do, they have multiple bills on their calendar. They had, I think, they were doing S5 today. So doing a budget, a presentation on S5 as it passed the House, and also third reading of the Senate. And I don't know what else. The Senate bill, budget bill.
Yeah, I'm curious. We have not yet debated or voted on early child care education in the House.
That's right. It's still moving through our committee process. So
But-
it's in Ways and Means now, I believe, or will be.
Signed there today.
Do we know when? I mean,
I think it will probably be out of there tomorrow or Tuesday.
so next week
And then
we'll
we'll come to appropriations first. Then when we vote it out, it'll eventually arrive at the floor. Because it's a Senate bill and a Met crossover, there's no particular, the pressure is, it's part of the final construct and final negotiations.
But it was in a House committee right across the hall.
Yeah, it's moved through the House process. Complex bills often will move through 3 to 5 committees. The key issue is because it's an S bill, we're not under the pressure of having not met crossover. So then.
But we will have the opportunity to discuss, advocate.
It can't become part of the budget construct without it having come to the floor in some form.
Thank you.
There is money set aside in the House budget. We made an estimate, 72 million. We said, this is for the purpose of our childcare bill. So we have a starting point in a negotiation, but we need the actual bill and the policy language
Thank you.
to go along with it.
Thank you.
That answered it for me.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Organic dairy farmers?
Heard of them.
Yeah.
9.2 million.
Well, I heard, it didn't make it up.
6.8, 6.8, 6.8, 6.9, something like that, yes.
Is that likely to stay, do you think?
Well, we'll have to see because, so the good news is that it was part of our budget adjustment position. And as we all know, we deferred to them to take the lead. The downside of that strategy is that it's not in our budget. And so our first negotiating position as the House is our budget has passed. In this case, we did pass the budget knowing that the Senate was taking the lead on something. So we're friendly to the concept. It will become part of the final negotiations.
Thank you.
So given that it wasn't adopted as a reserve fund, like the same way you described 72 million was put aside,
Yeah.
can we boost it back up again? Back to our 9.2?
Oh, I think that would be very hard.
Oh, really? Okay. So we would be arguing for what the Senate,
Yes, I mean, it's theoretically possible, but,
no, I understand the
I
theory,
think
but
6.8 is better than 0.
I agree. Agree.
yeah. And you'll see the governor's, Ag Innovation Fund that the Appropriations Committee cut, that you had recommended cutting slightly from the original proposal. The Appropriations Committee then cut. In the Senate, they cut it additionally another 2.7 million. So it's 2.3 million sitting there right now.
That was the original 10 million.
Oh, really? We're down to 2 something now?
2.5.
Wow, that's been slashed twice, 3 times.
We're both awash in money and don't have anywhere near enough. Because there are things that it is probably hard. I mean, I'm sort of trying to be explicit about my own experience in a way just to be helpful for those of you who are new especially. But even in this committee and my own experience earlier in my career, it's sometimes hard to understand what is happening in budget world and why things, like why are we suddenly spending $100 million or somewhere in that range on Medicaid rates, you know, that seems weird. But we have this very bad pattern that we're in, a whack-a-mole, where certain parts of our service delivery system like haven't had funding in 20 years or haven't had, you know, a rate change in 15 years or whatever the case is. And we typically have been so resource constrained because we still want to do all the things that we want to do that we pick and choose any given year, 1 or 2 to get minor tweaks. And so it's like, the reason I say it's whack-a-mole is because you can never stop that process and you aren't solving the structural problem. And the Medicaid rate, so, you know, that we did in the House and the Senate has also done a substantial, you know, thing on, is a much more systemic approach, but addresses that, but it's a lot of money. And so when you look, you think, oh, there's 400 million at one-time dollars, you know, between the governors, this and that. But when you lop off a quarter of that almost just to adjust those rates, huge impact in the field, whether it's primary care, whether it's elder care, it's going to, you know, ambulance services, there's all kinds of different people who are potentially affected by that and for the positive. But this is the dynamic that we have to look at across all of state government. It's just where are we and why?
Representative Supernath?
Thank you. Is that 2.3 million for just what the governor proposed for those specific sectors of agriculture, or is that for, like, say, what Senate Ag is looking to go for?
Actually, that's a good question. I haven't looked at the exact language.
Okay.
And similarly, there's a question mark that you all need. We'll need you to look at this, like, you know, go through the budget and pull out all the sections that you've touched, whether it's diversified ag, which I kept to 150, whether it's this reduction. The organic dairy program has some language in there around conventional milk being shipped as organic that raised some red flags for people in our room, like what is going on there? I assume it has to do with timing and transition and certification, but you may all have more insight into the details of that. So I do recommend kind of scrubbing through the web report. There's a web report that tracks just changes, and that's on the JFO website. And what that means, the web report shows you the base budget of state government. So what is the B numbers, the C section and the D section and the E section and the F section. That's the B's are the core of our base. That's our base funding. And if a base budget, a B section is not in the changes only web report, then nothing has changed. And so you know that, like it's whatever, either whatever we had or whatever the Senate had. And I think that the way that they did this track changes, it's only left out if the governor's original proposal hasn't changed. So you can look in the ag areas and see if you flag anything. I will flag for you that they did not fund the Sustainable Jobs Fund $100,000 base increase that the House has in their budget for the farm to trade investment plan. They, I believe, reduced the project, sort of the project money for Sustainable Jobs Fund from 400 to 300,000. And
What about H205?
205, they reduced to 150. So they didn't kill it, but it's there. And they've added a couple things. They added an insurance payment, premium support, and something else a fencing thing, which I don't know.
That's the GPS fencing. Yeah.
Oh, that's related.
Make sure I'm not getting, I'm gonna tell my committee when I'm not coming down. Let's see. Oh, no, it's about tomorrow. Never mind. I'm good.
I think we should have a non-farm day at the cafeteria.
I'm with you on that one.
Only the cafeteria can only serve food that has nothing to do with agriculture.
100% back that, you know that.
What, like fake meat?
So you're out there.
That is actually a
chemical.
brilliant idea, Ronnie.
A dairy product or a food product?
It's got dairy in it. I don't bet the dark chocolate doesn't, but
Nothing worth.
It's we do
The ramrod.
we do a fundraiser, an empty bowl fundraiser, in my community for Rotary, where we don't tell the new Rotary Club does it once a year, we don't tell them, or I used to cater their lunches, and we would know. And initially it was like, they'd come, there was nothing, and then they paid their normal fee, and then they find out that they weren't getting any food. And then all the money would go to support hunger programs, but then people were avoiding coming. They'd sneak and figure it out, and so then we agreed to make them a simple soup, so they had a soup instead of nothing.
right.
But I'm with you, Rodney, 100%, you know I am.
Get that organized.
Where does one find the language for 205 in existence now?
Yeah, so, let's see, I'm trying to remember, it may be on our website.
Okay,
There isn't, but if it's not, it might be on JFO. There's a Sarah Clark annotated Senate budget document. Let me just see if right about that. It's 224 pages. That should be the full version. So I look first on JFO in the FY24 budget section. The top section is all the Senate related documentation that is now current to this moment in time. And then there's a chunk underneath that's the House.
We heard this morning and had some concerns about changes to the language around H205 that JFO made. So that were substantive changes.
The JFO made?
That's what we heard. And we heard that from Ledge Council, so.
Interesting. RJ on ours, when it was in our house? or when it was in the Senate?
Sorry, in the Senate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yes, please.
We'd like to know about that.
Yes.
okay.
What you can do, so the end of the session, talking to chairs becomes a much more sort of a speedy loop. But I would say that if you can help look through everything tomorrow and Tuesday, any comments that you have, get to me. I will curate them for my chair and to help with the conference committee process. But then David also is likely to be a direct channel to the chair during the conference process if there's something that's fast moving.
Other questions or budget related?
Where on the JFO website can we find that budget
So
document?
you're on So go
Well, now I'm trying to look for, you can just tell me later.
to the join appropriations. Sorry, subjects, here we go. Subjects.
Okay.
Appropriations and budgets.
Oh, great, okay.
FY '24.
Oh, thank you.
And then there's this, view all 10 entries. So this is all the documentation that they've turned in. And I believe that this one, oh, so there may still be another location for the language.
Okay, but this will show us where the changes are.
This will show you, that will show the web changes only.
Got it.
Will highlight because they
Okay.
have a one-time money spreadsheet. So the web report and the spreadsheet will show you all the money movement, and then the language, if it's not posted on our website, then we can find out where it will
Thank
be.
you, this is great, thanks.
Yeah, we'll make sure that whatever you just shared, Josie, everybody's got, so we can be looking at that.
Send your committee assistant sleuthing to find it. Erin can email you the summary language doc if it's not posted on our website.
Jen?
This is not important, but what, Representative Tolino, what village in Wyndham County do you represent or community? Where's not Wyndham 9?
Wyndham 9 is 1/3 of Brattleboro. I grew up in Marlboro, one town over, and then became a townie in my adult life, which floors me, and now I represent them. I'm 11 years into doing that.
The reason I ask is there's an unusual number of Tristans in Wyndham County.
And they both,
Representing this building.
Yeah.
And I just, with
I'm
that.
just gonna say, but you're gonna
Like I
say.
said, it wasn't an important question.
No, but I'm gonna say
I'm
that
curious.
I'm the OG Tristan here, very
You're
much.
the elder, the ranking Tristan.
I'm the ranking Tristan in the Tristan caucus, and just for a little fun, my father taught at Marlboro College for 48 years.
wow.
Until it closed. I worked there for the last 7 years in the grad school, but he taught in the undergraduate. And in this building, in the house, there are 3 undergraduate members of Marlboro College. Sarah Coffey, Emily Kornheiser, and Tristan Roberts all went to Marlboro as undergraduates. And Tristan studied with my father.
It's quite a intelligent bunch there.
We're doing all right, aren't we?
You-
And I have a graduate degree, my MBA was from Marlboro, so there are 4 of the 150 who have a degree, and a number of people who were in the nonprofit sector who had a graduate certificate in nonprofit leadership from our continuing education program within the graduate professional school. But that's not.
Maybe 50-some years ago, I served on the Wyndham County Regional Planning Commission, maybe closer to 60 years ago.
So I'm 51, so it was either just before I was born or maybe a little bit.
Big affinity for.
Thank you. Yeah, I love art. There's a lot to love.
Why don't we shift to the other reason that we had invited you?
Yeah. So, a little by way of background, because I'm kind of injecting myself in here. And so I want to, in terms of the performance measure conversation, and really this was an offer to the chair, and I appreciate you letting me follow through with this. And it's just to explain by way of background, a couple of pieces of what I thought might be useful to share with the committee. So 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, actually Marlboro Grad School and some external partners formed a coalition of folks trying to train and support the return to using the results-based accountability as a tool. It had been done by, I'm blanking on his name, hold on, Con Hogan in AHS for a few years, like a decade before, but it was not broadly adopted in state government. And so they were working on trying to get the nonprofit sector to adopt it, and then also to get state government to be much more fluent in it. And there was a pretty solid push within the legislature for a few years to do so. During that time, I was one of the people who was on the government accountability at the time, did the train the trainer for results-based accountability. And I think it has a lot of utility. I don't think it's the be-all end-all of all performance management, but it has utility. The chief performance officer of the state position was created. The Scott administration, when they came in, picked up the thread that the Shumlin administration had started about trying to sort of build more performance measurement using results-based accountability in. And Mitzi Johnson, while she was chair of appropriations, had made it a real priority of appropriations to ask the three RBA questions: how much, how well, and who's better off. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But and so there are, throughout state government, there have been varying degrees of performance measurement work. Some of it's done, there's two different processes. There's also a continuous improvement process using lean or other continuous improvement techniques. But then there's the RBA performance measures. As we headed into the budget process, it is typical for the chairs of the budget committees to send a letter to the Secretary of Administration requesting certain things when they come to give their budget presentations. And this year, we sort of asked them to share their performance measures with us in their budget presentations, and wherever possible to add context and external benchmarks and goals. We did that only probably 4 weeks before their budget presentations really started in earnest. And so we knew year one wasn't probably going to be the strongest year for us to do this together, but most of them submitted performance measures. What I would say is, and the Agency of Ag has a number of them. And what I am challenged by in the way that we're often seeing these performance measures is the lack of context and the fact that the point of performance measurement is to be able to see very quickly in kind of a shorthand sort of way, how are we doing? Are we heading in the right direction? Are we improving? What do we need to learn in order to change, to organize ourselves to do this work differently, to have better outcomes? And what we're getting really is data that's not capable of doing that. And it's not, and so then you step back and you think about our roles. And we are, of course, the policymakers, but we are also really, to the extent that we can do it, responsible also for ensuring that the policies that we've set in motion are having the impact we want. And for the policy committees, as you have done, you make recommendations to us, you say there's nothing really here to see in the budget or whatever. But if the performance measures that we're all using, the way that the agencies are sharing and talking about them and using them isn't obviously useful for us, then we're actually essentially going on faith or trust or belief that things are probably okay, as opposed to how we know. And I don't expect us to upend the whole universe in a few short hours. I asked the agency to take 2 of their performance measures and try to present them a little differently. That did not happen. I haven't followed up, so I'm not saying that that it was totally unreasonable. Things get lost in the shuffle. But I'm happy. I have a blank of something that I'm happy to sort of pass around and just talk through a little bit. And then I don't know if I can share screen from my computer or if I need to log into Zoom. We can give you
Yeah, you can zoom in. Then
I can zoom in, or I could tell you where to find the presentation and tell you what page, but which is better?
Probably if I just sent you the link.
And I'm good with either way. So let me pass this around. And, I'm just gonna get my, links to Zoom here. Yes.
It's the program that the administration does where they give grades to the different agencies and programs and their performance. Is that what you're touching on here?
So it's probably a blend of this and all of their process improvement work.
Okay,
Um,
so this is part of that.
Yeah, it's part of how they, and I'm not exactly sure, and it'd be worth asking the chief performance officer, what their methodology is.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we'll circle back to that, and I can ask some other questions after, see if I can get clearer to that. So has anybody seen RBA before or not seen RBA? Like, what's your level?
What is RBA?
RBA, results-based accountability.
Okay.
So that's the results-based accountability approach starts with these three fundamental questions. How much did we do? How well did we do it? Is anyone better off? It also makes a distinction between what they call programmatic measures and population measures. So population measures are the domain of our universe, like are Vermonters thriving? Like those kinds of outcome statements that are more global. Program measures are really tied to the programmatic performance. All program measures should in some way be connected to a larger population goal, but they're not unique, they're not solely responsible for it. So one of the problems that RBA was trying to solve for is that a lot of times programs end up feeling like they have to justify their existence by claiming more than is fair for them to do. In fact, they're one part of the tapestry of activities that are pointing towards a larger goal, and that their job is to look at their own program and say, with the work that we're doing, if we do our work well, who's better off and why? First thing I got dry. So how much did we do? For some reason I got booted out, but I'll see if I get back in. It's spinning right now. How much did we do? If you think about all the work that you do to hear from agencies and other programs, often how much we did is the metric that everybody likes to tell you. It's for whatever reason, we often default to that metric. But it's a measure of effort or of throughput, but it's not a measure of actual impact. How well did we do it should be a measure of the quality of the service delivery inside of the program. So if you're a call center, you might have how much did we do would be our annual call volume. How well did we do it might be we picked up within 2 minutes, or like the percent of calls that were answered within 2 minutes of their initiation or something like that. That would be a clear metric that would reflect how well you're doing at delivering that service. Is anyone better off? Well, if you're 211, a call center that directs people, it's a little tricky because they're not responsible for whether the services work for them, but there is anyone better off might be to what extent are they able to measure how well they do at taking the information and the need from the caller and directing them to the right resource. Because the assumption is that getting connected to the right resource will improve people's lives. And that's the core reason that program exists. On the ag side, I'll turn to that in just a second. But what you see at the bottom here is not an RBA formally, but I think is extraordinarily important when we turn to what the agency is giving us as an example, which is there an internal benchmark on our primary metric of our primary better off metric? So how have we been doing over time on this primary metric? If we've tracked it for 5 years, we should never get one data point, we should get a trend line. Because we want to know over time if we're underperforming, overperforming, if we're getting better or worse, we should know that. But one data point won't tell us that. And it's almost always reported in the current year and not, or like a 1 year look back, but not over time. And it should also show if we have a goal or target that we're steering to as part of our own internal performance management, that should be explicit so that we know. So if a program is performing like whatever the case may be, and I'm just going to hypothetical, like our goal is 15%. And our trend line shows that we've been stuck at 10%, whatever it is, for 5 years. And we haven't changed or redesigned anything. It begs the question, I think, both for us and for the program deliverers, what's going on? We aren't moving this curve at all, and we're falling short. We're short of our goal, and it's not improving. The outside benchmark on a primary metric is a totally different thing. The example I love to give is now 10 years old, but I used to be the chair of the Vermont Fresh Network board. I was a chef, very committed to local purchasing, became chair of the board. And we did a research project looking at the rate of growth of local purchasing in the food co-ops in Vermont. And my Brattleboro co-op was like really driving me crazy because they were not working well with the farmers. And the farmers were telling me, like, this is not working. And I went to the board, or I actually went first to the the general manager at the time, and he said, we're doing great. He said, we've grown by 15% for the last 3 years. And I said, with all due respect, Vermont Fresh Network just did a survey of the co-ops statewide, and your peers grew by 400% in the same time frame. So you are trumpeting your performance, but you're actually wildly underperforming your peers. And so what that told me is that the most likely explanation of what was going on is that shifts in consumer behavior were helping them sell more, but they hadn't really done anything to earn that performance. They were just, it was like the rising tide lifts all boats, but it wasn't because their effort was delivering on that. So if you don't have an external benchmark of any kind, it's very hard to know whether you're doing well or not.
You say their effort wasn't, but was there an effort?
So they thought that they were making some effort. I would say I thought it was minimal personally. And that was what I was trying as a co-op member and as a part of the effort to get them to join the Vermont Fresh Network, to see the opportunity they had as sort of an economic engine for local purchasing. But it was, like they're like, no, we don't need to do anything different. We're already growing by 15% a year. And it's like, yes, but everybody else is growing,
It is kind of like, retrospective, right? So you're looking back and you're saying, oh, we didn't do that great. Are there tools that can give more immediate feedback that like, rather than letting it get bad, that catch it before it gets bad?
So I think places that take performance management of this type very seriously, that are really focused on outcomes, absolutely can, they absolutely can do real-time data.
Really?
There's no reason they can't. It's, it's resources. Sometimes there's a need to develop the data, like there's, gaps in data and people get caught up in, well, what's a real claim and not a real claim. RBA is really clear. It says if you don't have a perfect measure, find one that's a good proxy until you can measure with a better one. Because it's all about harnessing our natural human abilities at self-improvement.
Mm.
And so when we're reporting honestly, transparently, and with, like a good dialogue about, how are we actually doing it? These programs are intended to make a difference. How are we doing? It's no one can hide from the performance, but if you can't hide and you can see, I think we could do better if we made these changes, then you're going to have an incentive to make those changes ahead of, coming in next year and saying, well, we really screwed that up. But maybe next year will change. Then you're probably going to try to change ahead of that. So you can say, we were failing to meet our goal, but we've adjusted and now our trend line is turning in a positive direction. And on the budget side, part of our responsibility is not to overreact to one-year data. Like not to overreact and punish, but to give places a chance to actually adapt. Because otherwise, we're asking them to be transparent, but then we're cutting their heads off.
So in a way, a 1-year term is real time in government speak.
It is.
Yeah.
So let me show you a couple of examples and then we'll go from there. So these are the performance measures. Can you all see them? Yeah. So what I personally look for is the explanatory power first and foremost. So how are we, what are we doing? What's the kind of explicit way that it makes an impact or people's lives better? And is it obvious just from the data how to interpret and understand it? And then the trend line and relative to peers. So this one, for example, this is food safety. And so the question that I had when I looked at this slide is, okay, so first off, I have no idea if we're doing better or worse this year than we were last year. I have no idea what our goals are, what's reasonable to expect. I have no idea what we think high performance looks like. I also have no idea why the number of compliance activities is an indicator of us being better off. And I don't know from this presentation of the information whether we were better in 2021 or better in 2022. So one could make the case that if you have 2,600 inspections and 47 compliance activities, then that's a percent, and that if that percent goes down, things are better off because inspection performance is better. But you're having to really work hard to figure out what's actually happening there to understand whether things are better off. It will make more sense to the people running this program because they're in the workflow themselves, but I would actually respectfully challenge them to say, actually doing something that included all the elements on the paper I gave you would actually be better, even for them. Because I think it would be clearer what the purpose of this program is and how it actually improves the quality of life.
But Tristan, Representative Cellino.
Tristan is fine.
I can see that up in the right-hand corner of the slide, and probably others see it too, because it's pretty
bold. FY24 budget, House Appropriations Committee. So this was part of, and I see on the left, it was like a deck.
Yes.
This is part of the budget presentation that the agency made to your committee.
That's right.
And I know the agency was in this committee and also had a slide deck, and maybe this looks somewhat familiar, maybe we all saw it too. Was the agency asked to, and what I'm getting at is why it's part of the budget presentation?
Yeah, that was in our letter. We asked them to include in the budget presentation any performance measures they have.
Okay, this is what they provide.
And this is what they provided.
So the agency has this performance measure and others perhaps that are also on other slides. Did the legislature at some point say, come up with some performance measures, or do they say, here are specific measures we'd like you to report on?
So it's really important. It isn't our job to tell them what their performance measures at the programmatic level should be. They have had the chief performance officer supporting and others before that position existed, supporting the internal to the executive branch development of different performance measurement systems. And so results-based budgeting has been part of the executive branch work for 8 to 10 years, to varying degrees. And so we just asked them to report to us what they had. And again, my purpose in bringing it to you and to engaging in this way is not to shame them or to say, like, you're uniquely bad or anything like that. It's simply to ask the question, in our job as legislators in oversight and in follow through on our policy frameworks that the administration as the executive branch is responsible for executing. If the information that we get isn't useful to us in helping to understand that, on what basis should we be continuing to fund the programs as they're currently designed? And I would prefer that the answer, personally prefer that the answer not be habit. That we do it because we've always done it that way. But absent some other rationale, it becomes anecdotal, essentially.
Are you expecting this to happen now for the budget?
No.
Okay,
no.
because I was gonna say this would have been really helpful 3 months ago.
I asked for it 3 months ago. We asked for it 4 months ago. We got this 3 months ago. I gave the feedback to the deputy in our budget walkthrough, and I suggested that they take this and think about it and maybe experiment with 1 or 2 of their performance measures.
Okay.
And that I would be happy to work with them on that. I have not heard back since I followed up about 2 weeks after that to see if they had taken it to their manager meeting. So again, this is it could take us 3 years. It could take us 5 years, but it could take us 1 year. I don't know. But if this is of interest to you as a committee to think about how you do your job of vetting the policy choices and programmatic choices that we're making and the effectiveness of state government, if you want more from them, then we can all be partners in working together on this kind of stuff. A lot of the data, the data is going to fall to them. The decision about what metrics matter most are going to, that's their decision. But if their decision doesn't translate to you feeling like you can make an informed recommendation to the appropriations committee, then we have 2 committees that are flying blind. Let me show you a couple more just to show you that this pattern is not, so I'll get out of food safety. So Maple, same construct, inspections, compliances, and licensing. That's food, also still in the food safety. Looking for a good, better off measure. This was an interesting one on the produce program. So the objective is to help Vermont growers implement on-farm produce safety practices and compliance with FSMA. And I'm not clear. So again, I'm looking at this as a single slide, not having the deeper conversation. But from my perspective, looking at it at first glance, how do I know the total number of support services provided to Vermont produce farms? I'm assuming that was 322 times that they provided a service to Vermont produce farms. And not that there were 322 different services that they're providing, but rather that these were incidents of providing a service to Vermont Produce Farms, that number dropped in 2022. I don't know if it dropped because of a shift in their staffing, if a shift in demand, and I don't know who's supposed to be better off and how. Because if the objective is to ensure compliance, I'm not sure how that indicates whether they're being successful. Simply having a service event isn't clear to me. How does that translate to either compliance with FSMA or the successful implementation of on-farm produce safety standards? And so they may say, well, we don't have a metric, but it's a great conversation. And then you could say, well, love to have you come back with a recommendation on how you could improve the kind of the transparency, communication, all of that. So, again, also, what's the trend line beyond 2 years? If this is a program that's existed longer than 2 years, what's their internal goal so that we can judge whether they're kind of moving in the right direction or not? Yeah.
I guess you also have to weed through people's presentation, meaning, they're going to want, if they know it's an evaluation, they're going to show their best face forward. How do you look past that angle and get to the real data, right?
Well, so the RBA methodology of focusing on is anyone better off, and really trying to prioritize having both a quantitative measure and a percent measure of some sort, so that you're getting an internal benchmarking of the relative weight of that. So, like if you only have a number, you might not know that it's actually 3% of the targeted population. So you try to get both of those together and your better off measures. But really, it's in the decision about the better off measure that the real magic happens. Because if it's legit and it's really tied, and there's a whole methodology to try to support that, but if and they have those methodologies in the Chief Performance Office. They've been trained on them. Most of the areas of government had liaisons at one point that have been trained at the next level to try to support them. But I wouldn't say expect them to redo 25 different performance measures, by next January. But if there were 2 or 3 of them that were of real interest to this committee, and you wanted to noodle on it a little bit, understand the thinking behind what they've chosen and why, and ask them to explain why, and sort of indicate that that's going to be hard for you to make a recommendation next year on that particular program without a shift in the way that they report the information, so that you can understand their impact better. It is a form of performance improvement. This one I think is a little clearer. I would love to see sort of macro and an external benchmark, but because the goal is to advance the sale of these products, the measurement of increased in product output is a meaningful metric. But it's just not, it doesn't have the longer trend lines, and I would think, for instance, it might be interesting to look at that against either a New England average or a comparator state, for instance, if we thought.
I was going to ask, are other states, in order to do that, you'd have to get data from the other state. Other states would need to be doing what you're suggesting, and it would have to happen to be the same objective.
But that's part of the selection process of your output measures. So you might have a conversation. I mean, they might internally. Well, here are the 10 possible ideas that we've had. 3 of them, we have a really good comparator in New England or in Massachusetts or Maine, and so let's prioritize reporting on that one because it both reflects the impact of our activity and we have a good external benchmark. And they might still say the best performance measure that we have simply does not have a comparable anywhere that makes sense as an external benchmark. But I still think that they should put their internal goal and a long enough trend line for you to be able to evaluate whether they are meaningfully moving either past the goal or failing to meet it, or where they are in their own programmatic performance. Let's see if I can get one more here. So this one is interesting. This is for their federal grant, but the better off measure is the number of farmers who have learned new management strategies. And I would say that's a pretty weak better off measure, because I think we all know, I think we've all been through trainings, and then actually implementing a training versus sitting through one is totally different. And so if it was the number of farmers or the percentage of the farmers in the total class of farmers that are eligible who have implemented new management strategies as a result of the training, that would be a much stronger better off measure, because it would be both showing the relative impact of the program and relative to the larger population that's of eligible participants, and the specific impact, on the percent of people who've had a training who actually are applying it. So those would be two metrics that could go side by side and tell a much better off story. Let me see if I can find one more and then I'll shut up. The better off. This one was an interesting one to me as well, because this is around Act 250 and prime ag soils. And again, I think it is not clear to me from this slide. They have two better off measures, on-site mitigation and off-site mitigation. But I'm not clear on what is the optimal scenario. What's the best expectation we have for this Act 250 program? And what does that look like? And how would we measure whether we're achieving that goal or not? And so not only does it not have trend lines and any benchmarks, but it's just not obvious on the surface. Like, is this good or not good? Maybe it is to you. It's not to me. Does anyone here know whether this is a good, are we doing really, really well or not?
Could be clearer.
Could be what?
Could be clearer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even, I mean, I think you're asking, should it be a higher number or a lower number? I'm not sure if you're asking, should it be a higher or lower number, or whether it's even a measure that.
So all of the above, right? Because it's not obvious. Offsite mitigation acreage went from 416 to 300. Is that the right direction, the wrong direction? It's not obvious whether we want, whether a 3-to-1 ratio between offsite and onsite is actually also ideal or not ideal. Like, is that better than 4-to-1 the year before? I mean, like, is our best performance of the ag side of the Act 250 process around all of these, how we protect our prime ag soils and how we do have these programs. I remember I was in here when we did some of them a while ago about, like, if you're going to take prime ag soil out of use for an Act 250 permitted project, the on-site and off-site mitigation matters. But I think but for us, we shaped that policy. We should be able to tell whether our policy is working or not. And our agency should be able to tell us in a way that we understand whether it's working or not. And what I think where we've gotten to sort of by accident is a place where we don't have those answers, and it's not obvious from what they're sharing with us how to interpret what they understand about those programs. And so again, it's not to hijack the right of them that they have as the program leaders themselves to develop all of this But it is fair and reasonable to ask them to put that information in front of us in a way that we can understand and make decisions from, because we are the ones who set those policies in place and terminate policies and adjust policies and set the budgets.
Representative Lipsky.
So I agree. I don't know if they deserve an F or an A for performance. Do you have an idea?
So it seems to me it's more of this is a function of how many, how many applications there were, and it's maybe not even relevant to ask how well we did on this measure.
Well, except that we have a goal of protecting prime ag soils. So how do we want to measure our success at protecting prime ag soils? Act 250 and on and offsite mitigation is one of our policy tools for protecting prime ag soils. So we should know, what does that look like in practice?
Maybe it looks like grants that diversify agricultural land.
I know there are good policy answers. But I mean, in terms of what they're currently doing with the programs that we've created, we should know whether, that we understand it. I would also quibble, like on this one, for instance, the how well measure. The number of projects reviewed under the 9B process, again, it's a function of throughput. They're not in control of that measure. And I think it would be much more interesting as a how well did we do our work measure would be if we had 50, what's the average time it took us to review our applications? And so the how much we did would be how many applications did we receive? The how well did we do with it is how long did we process it? What was the percentage of them that were taken to appeals, because they didn't like our decision-making process? What are the number of appeals that we lost? Those are all potential measures for how well we did at managing that activity level.
I mean, you brought up soil, prime soil protection. I was considering this very analysis recently when we were taking testimony from Act 250 folks. And so, the whole program is set to protect the soils, yet there are these situations where you pay enough money, you get to build on ag soils, right? So then they divert that money to protect ag soils. So overall, are we losing or gaining here? We might still be losing.
And we might have slowed the rate of loss.
Or that, which may be a success, depending on your metric.
Right. And that's why the internal goal setting, making that explicit is so important to me, because it sets the bar of what's a reasonable expectation. And we can still debate it. Like if you said, I think a reasonable goal based on our last 10 years of history is that we can achieve this in this program, and be like, yeah, but we have to do better than that because of the net effect is, catching up with us. And we could argue about that, but at least we know then, we're in the same universe. We're speaking the same approximate language around the impact of this program and how we evaluate it. And they could say, sure, we could have a 5% improvement gain, but we need a half position more to do that. And then it becomes a really important question. Okay, is that something that you would recommend to the budget committee, and how do we fit that information in against all of the other competing pressures? But at least we would know that there is some rationale for why that is being recommended. And I want to reiterate again, I am only using them as an example because of your committee jurisdiction. I have having similar conversations with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, with the Department of Labor. And the committee, our committee as a whole has asked this of all of state government as a whole. So it's and I feel like it's a collaborative process, not a punishment process.
Well, good, thank you. This has been a good sort of high-level introduction and with some actual examples. Appreciate that. I am aware that some of our committee may be peeling off momentarily, and I know that we possibly want to hear, I don't know, Steve, if you, we're all done here with this, Laura.